the council, their meetings with the NCDOT, and so we had some feedback from that.
Sorry, Mayor. I think your microphone's off.
You're right. It was off. So, as I was saying, we have actually had discussions among ourselves in the past here, and both John Taylor and Jeremy were up there in Carthage to chat with NCDOT, and so this topic is familiar to all of us. Some of us more than others, but I don't know if it was a mistake, but I decided to try to find the June 28th, 2022 presentation at this council by NCDOT, their very first presentation, and I was a new council member at the time, and I found it on YouTube. It's not on our, you can't go that far back, I guess, on our site. But it's all there in its glory. And they did do a good job with their presentation then. But, of course, that was 2 versions ago. That was before they got to the shifted pillow. It was their literal announcement of the CFI. But if you have an interest on the history of the takeoff of this, and they went through all these different options they had. I'd forgotten this. They had put up on the screen like 10 different options that they had looked at. And over the years, and Craig Scheffler, I believe that's his last name. He's still involved now. He's a consultant, and he was involved there, and he did a very good job with the presentation. I mean, he didn't find a lot of cheerleaders among the council at the time, but anyway, I just suggest that to you if you're going to burn some time. But I had a few things that I wanted to say because there's been a significant recent development, so recent, it's between our last council meeting and this council meeting, and it made some quite surprising news and headlines, and I think it's an impactful item regarding the traffic circle and beyond. It's just not a traffic circle decision, and that was the lead story in the pilot. New projections show less growth. That is a headline that I don't think anyone alive here today has seen in the pilot in many years. What was the surprising issue about this? And I want to give real credit to 2 people, or 3 people, I guess. First, our colleague John Taylor, who has been writing in the pilot at least 2 times, I don't know if it was 3, about how we should be careful about these projections we're getting about population. And because 2 years ago, the state demographer predicted 180,000 people in Moore County. And then year after that, he revised it down about to 172 or so. And then he just released some new information that took it down, and this is a projection between now and 25 years from now. It's a 2050 projection to 140, which is 21, I think John told me this, 21.7% less than the original projection, which is significant. If any of us had a business or were planning things in our lives, that's just not a rounding number that we'd have to deal with. It's a serious number. And so it strikes me that, and one of the interesting things about that number, my first thought was, before it was explained to me, is what's happened here in this county? Why would that be so dramatic? And the answer was, we're not alone. Almost every county that touches us had a significant correction between the 2025 number and the proposed 2050 projection. With one exception, that was Richmond County. They had a little bump the other way. So we're, to borrow a phrase from that song, we're not alone in what's happened to us. It's not It's not something to panic about. It's not that we're not going to grow. We're going to keep growing, but we're growing at a significantly less rate than what had been projected. And I want to also compliment Doug and the staff because when they put in their data for this village to the SMPO, if you remember when Doug showed it to us, the demographer had about 5,000 more people in the village of Pinehurst than Doug was projecting for 2050. I mean, it was two views of what was happening. And of course, Doug's numbers were detailed based on our little world around here, the lots we have, the zoning we have, what John Taylor has often said, that the constraints that demographers don't really look at, and we smartly factor that in. From a statistical standpoint, I'll finish with this, and then I'm going to ask John to chime in because he has really done yeoman's work here. And by the way, I want to compliment two other people, and I sent this to you all today. By accident, I stumbled onto a column from May of 2024 written by two residents of Pinehurst, Scott Stanley and Bruce Geddes, who's on our neighborhood advisory committee. This was May of, so it's almost 2 years ago, when it was the number being projected by the demographer was 180,000. And they said, you know, you can't look at things like that. They thought that number was too large. And they decided to pick, as an example, another case, another way to look at this. And I don't know how they came up with it, but they plucked out a number of 140,000. Now, could be luck, but they're two pretty smart engineers, and they were doing the factoring in of constraints and other things. But here's the number as I wanted to leave you with. My point here is that this is no longer the year 2000 in Moore County or in Pinehurst. This is the year 2025 or 26 now. And times change. In the decade from 1990 to 2000, Pinehurst grew by 90%. Think about that. This is population numbers. Moore County grew by 27%. The next decade, from 2001 to 2010, Pinehurst kept growing, but by 35%. Moore County kept growing, but by 18%. In 2011 through 2020, another decade, Pinehurst continued to grow, but they came down to 27% in that decade. And still a healthy number. And now, and Moore County continued to grow, but they were down to 13%. So we've got growth. We're doing the best we can to manage it with the tools that we have at our disposal. But we're just not growing at the rate we used to grow as a county or as a village. And the numbers that are tossed around as to what will be an annual growth rate are much higher than the number the state demographer's number that would translate into 0.95% for Moore County. So I say that because as we enter into this discussion, and I know we have residents who are interested in this topic as well as us, and so John, why don't you take it from there?
I was actually going to do this the other way, but I'll do it this way. And I actually think it was that article from May of 24 that Scott and Bruce wrote that got me interested in this in the first place. And I'm pretty sure that the way that they came up with their number of 140,000 was they looked at the long-term growth of Moore County population, which was 1.2 or 1.3%, and they extrapolated that out, and it came to a much lower number than the demographer was. And Pat is right. I've actually gotten to know the state demographer, spoke with him on Friday afternoon, actually. He's a very good guy and likes explaining how they go about this stuff. And it is, and the first thing is to know that they do not put constraints on their forecasts. And when I first found that out, which was over a year ago, and I asked him why, he said, because the minute I put a constraint on it, people will start arguing whether the constraint is correct or not, right? And they're no longer going to look at the numbers. They're going to argue about that. But when Doug or any of his village manager colleagues in Moore County, when they are asked to do forecasting, they almost can't do it unconstrained. It is because of the world that they live in, and to a certain extent the world that we live in, it's always going to be a constrained estimate. How many lots are there? What else do we know is coming down the pike? So we have a relatively small number of lots, excluding Pine Wild, but we know about Pine Wild. They've told us what they want to do, and so we can factor in a reasonable set of assumptions about how that might turn out and how that might impact our numbers. So I handed out two pieces of paper, and we'll start with the one Pat did. It says state population projection on the top. And Pat, the state demographer starts with the decennial census. So in this case, he's starting with the 2020 census. And he makes projections, and every year in September or October, he gets feedback from the U.S. Census Bureau. He's getting actual births and deaths as recorded by First Health and other sources in the county. He's getting data on vehicle registrations or voter registrations. So there's a lot of information that he is taking in from which he formulates these forecasts. So the gray line was what he was projecting in 2023. And so he starts getting all this new data in September and October, and in January of every year, he comes out with his new forecast. And he calls that the vintage forecast. So vintage 2023 would actually have come out in January of 2024. And that's where you were getting up to, down on the, for Moore County, that's where you were getting to 180,000. Actually, I don't think I printed what I intended. Oh, so yeah, that was Moore County growing to 180,000. And at that point in time, he was forecasting that Moore County over the next, his horizon then was 2050. He's now gone out to 2060. But he was forecasting that Moore County was going to grow 1.85%. Well, he didn't pick that number out of the clear blue sky. Partially impacted by COVID, we saw a spike in inward migration to Moore County. The number of births and the number of deaths every year has remained relatively constant. The sole source of growth in Moore County really has been inward migration from people like me, who my wife and I moved here in 2012, and I don't think any of us are native. Well, Jeremy's wife is a native, I guess, but none of us are natives of Moore County here. We've all moved here from somewhere else. And you can see the growth rates that he was assuming for the state of North Carolina and for the adjacent counties. Those are the 8 counties that abut Moore County, Chatham, Cumberland, so forth. He did do a 2024 forecast. I just didn't think, and you've got the line for that, the orange line. That's what the 2024 forecast. And it came down a little bit for the state. It really didn't come down very much for the county and the adjacent counties. But this year when I went to look at it, and they actually came out on January 29th or 30th, I was struck by the magnitude of the revision. Because Pat said, if you look at that difference from the orange or the gray line down to the blue line, it's about 86,000 people for Moore County and the other 9. For Moore County alone, I believe it was 31,000 and 45,000 for the adjacent counties. And Pat is right. The only county where he is projecting an increase in population from his earlier prediction was Richmond County. There are 42 counties in the state out of the 100 where he is projecting a population decline. Cumberland happens to be one of those. And Cumberland is an interesting case demographers generally have difficulty dealing with towns or counties that have one of three things in them, either universities, prisons, or military bases. But he does get, he gets barracks information from the fort, and he admits that, and Cumberland is one of 12 or 13 counties where he has to make some adjustments because of the presence of the military there and the base. But he gets barracks information from them and so forth. So he is making, subject to them being unconstrained, he's making the best guess he can make. And of course, the problem is anytime you take any number and you compound it out, to even if it's only a 1% number, 1.5% number, over 25 years, it becomes material. Okay, so I've been looking at this for a year and a half, close to 2 years. I actually have submitted another op-ed to the pilot, which I hope will run this coming, it could be Wednesday, more likely it'll be Sunday, talking about the size of these reductions, and the simple answer as to why, because that was the first question that I wanted to ask him before I sent anything in, was, and the answer is he's substantially adjusted the migration assumptions. And importantly, he differentiates between domestic migration, people coming from anywhere else in the United States, another county or another state, and international migration, which is anybody coming from outside. And that includes, the serviceman who's based in Germany and gets transferred back here. That's an international migration, even though the person is a citizen. So it has nothing to do with citizenship per se. So these are the numbers, and they've come down a lot. Let's put that to the side for the moment, because you've heard me talk about the SMPO, which Pat now chairs. When Moore County, the State Transportation Department builds a transportation demand model for every county. And they've been in the process for the last year and a half of updating the one for Moore County. And one of the key inputs, once they get I'll call them the formulas, the calculations correct, they need data to put into that. And the data they get from going to all of the individual towns and then going to the county for the unincorporated areas and getting them to make projections. Doug did it obviously for Pinehurst, started with 2025, that's a reasonably knowable number. He projected it out to 2030, and again, he may or may not have thought of this explicitly, but implicitly he had constraints there in what he forecast. And then the SMPO will then adopt, or the governing board adopts an assumed growth rate. In this case, at the moment, that growth rate is 1.75%. And they extrapolate that out from 2030 out to 2055. You can compare that 1.75 to any of these growth rates here that the demographer has in 2025. It's all a lot higher. So the SMPO forecast is much higher than the state demographer would say, but that's actually, by itself, that's okay. So our topic tonight is really to talk about the traffic circle. Why does any of this matter? When the state, 2 years ago, when the shifted pillow continuous flow intersection was the projected solution, there was a belief that there was actually a measurement taken. They put down tubes on all the 5 roads into the traffic circle. It came up with round numbers, 50,000 vehicles a day going through the traffic circle then. And they made a projection, and we can go into the details why, but I'm not sure it really matters, be 80,000 in 2050. That was their number. And based on that, they projected delays. They projected how long the queues would be leading into the traffic circle. And based on that, they said, we have to do something. And what they came up, or their engineers said, the optimal solution is the shifted pillow CFI. If you take the projections that Doug did, and actually in a funny way, although he actually didn't project population, he projected households. How many houses are going to get built, or apartments, or what? How many households? And demographers use 2.35 as the average occupancy in a household. So if you know you're going to have 1,000 households, they assume you're going to have 2,350 people there. So what Doug actually did was he projected households, and from that, they extrapolated back to population. Well, that equation can work both ways. If you have an estimate of population, you can divide that by 2.35 and get a number of households. And actually, as Jeremy said, I spent some time with the fellow who actually works for DOT in Raleigh, who is in charge of the Moore County TDM, and learned a little bit more about how they think about it. And they think in terms of households. And they also have some statistics that they use for how many trips per day an average household would generate. And usually it's somewhere between 6 and 10. There's, pluses and minuses to that, but that's a guesstimate. So if you took this 86,000 number that Moore and the surrounding counties are expected, the reduction in the growth, they're still going to grow in absolute terms, but the reduction in growth of 86,000 people, and you divided that by 2.35, you get 36,600 households. And if you multiply that even by 6, you get over 200,000 trips for the region. Now, not all of those are going through the traffic circle, but it is obviously a substantial reduction, and the DOT believes correctly that trips through the Pinehurst traffic circle are not driven by Pinehurst population alone. That's certainly right. It's just one interesting statistic that we learned. 51% of the people who come to the hospital originate outside of Moore County. And depending on where outside, they may be going through the traffic circle. So point of all this is, as we have the shifted pillow was taken off the table. We have a new design that was not one of the 18 that was studied by DOT and their consultants 2 years ago. But it is based on this premise of traffic of 80,000. And I think it would be very difficult to make the case that that is still a valid assumption. I don't know what assumption they will come up with. Some of it will be driven by assumptions that the SMPO decides on. And some of it will, and the county also in its forecast, they use 1.5% as a growth rate. Both of those look to be too high to me. If the goal of the SMPO was to make accurate population predictions, which it is not. They're here to decide what sort of transportation plans, roadways, and other things need to be built. But I think with respect to the traffic circle, it would be difficult to maintain that 80,000 trips a day should be the forecast in 2050. And if it's not, maybe there is a different design that would produce acceptable results. So with that as a segue, I want to go to the other sheet of paper I handed out. So DOT has a new design. They hold a public meeting back at, what was it, the end of October? Yep. Right? They were actively soliciting comments, and they sent me it was actually, I say it was 235. They got 236, but one of them appeared to have been duplicated, so I just took that out. I didn't put it in twice. And they grouped them into 11 or 12 major categories from which they generated a standardized response. So anyone who sent in a comment to them, if they had an email address, the DOT sent a response back. Thank you for your interest, and here's our reaction to your comment. I broke them down slightly differently, but not dramatically differently. And I'll say that the comments fall into two categories. The explicit like or the explicit don't like. People said, I like this design, or I don't like this design. They were very clear about that. So that was there's very little that I think anyone, if they sat down with me and went through the spreadsheet, I don't think they would question either of those numbers. The implicit were, this is certainly some of my judgment, if someone came up with 5 different things that they didn't like, but they didn't say anywhere, I don't like the design, I put that in as an implicit don't like. And by the same token, if they said, we think this will improve X, Y, and Z, but they didn't say I like the design, I put that into implicit like. So I'm trying to be an honest broker here, and I think I tried to do that. Some other ones are a little harder. If they talked about trees, is that aesthetic or is that environmental? Reasonable people could disagree. I tried to be consistent in how I grouped them. So you see the numbers. The combination of implicit and explicit don't like is almost 60%, versus the combination of who would like is 12%. So clearly, the DOT, which has expressed a desire for public support for whatever they're going to do, they've not achieved it with this design, at least not yet, at least not as people understand it. A couple of other interesting things that I thought, you'll see just above the top green bar, wait time okay. There were a number of people who said, you know, if I have to wait an extra minute or whatever, I don't care. There were only 2 people who said, you got to do something. These wait times are killing me here. I was surprised. There were 6 people who proposed some kind of way for golf carts to get through the traffic circle using a tunnel or a bridge or what have you. Even multimodal would include bicycles. I like to ride my bike. I live in Southern Pines and I want to go out, you know, north and west of here, and I got to get through the traffic circle some way. The other thing that was not particularly surprising to me was the number of people who commented one way or another on speed. That was both the approach speed of the 5 roads that come to the circle and the speed of people traveling in the circle. And I spoke with Craig Scheffler, I don't know, a week or 10 days ago, a very nice guy who loves talking about this, and he is actually, his field of expertise is traffic modeling. Because I wanted to understand from him, how do they come up with the idea that the line is going to be 3,000 feet long, or it's going to take 5 minutes to go through, or whatever. And I said, one of the most common questions that I get from people is, if we slowed everyone down to 25 miles an hour, surely more cars would get through. And he said, actually, that isn't the way the model works. It's not what the model says. And simplifying a longer conversation, from the point that you enter the circle to the point that you exit the circle is going to take you longer if you're going 25 rather than 35 or some other speed. So yes, more people might be able to get into the circle, but it's still going to take them longer. And net, you don't actually improve efficiency. So let me stop just at the moment before I kind of wrap up with my conclusion for questions here.
Let me just, 2 quick things to interject. I did bring with me the John Taylor, February 12th, 2025 op-ed with a very prescient headline on it. Will Moore County grow to 180,000 people, ? So I don't know what, you know, magic Karnak the Magnificent projections you make, but we'll leave that now.
After having talked to Bruce and Scott, I thought their basic logic made sense, and when I looked at the demographic numbers, it made even more sense. So.
And then in October of 2024, which actually before John's one, the pilot had a very interesting one where they asked the same question. Future traffic may not be in the cards, the flaw of outdated data. And they basically suggested Pinehurst would do well to lean into Taylor's reasoning. That's John Taylor. The last thing I wanted to point out is that one of the things we've heard, and I think it was always correct, and John mentioned to it, is that a lot of people go through that traffic circle that don't live here. It's regional as far as an intersection. And one of the interesting aspects of this new data from the demography was that the counties surrounding us are also having a declining growth rate. So the idea that all these additional people would be factored in, aside from the 40,000 less in Moore County that was being projected, also sort of undermines that theory that it's going to get clogged up from elsewhere, not just you all people in Pinehurst. So anyway, I just want to throw those things in because it sounded familiar. And Jeremy, I know you had something to say and observe.
Well, no, I'll just kind of add by saying, I'm pretty sure at this point in time, there's not a person in Moore County, I said this to him on the phone the other day, that really understands the data behind our population and trends right now more than John Taylor. Okay, and I'm not saying that out of flattery to this man. I'm saying that out of all of the data that he's put in. And we continue to see all of this data trending. I'm not going to say against, but trending in defense of our position and against the DOT's position to make the changes to the circle. Safety, we made the data presentation to them. John Taylor's made the population data trend to them. It was stated in our meeting from them that they did not expect any of the new population numbers to change their model much at all. You remember them saying that? And that was before these numbers came out. So I don't know if they were expecting them to change this low, but that was a statement that was made to us. So in a lot of ways, I think they want to be resistant to this data. You know, so not just what John's showing them, any. So really my observance, obviously is a little different because I don't dig into the data the way John does. But we're fundamentally approaching this thing from two different ways, and I made the statement to them. What's seemingly important to them is efficiency first, safety, and then aesthetics. What seems to be important to us, not only Pinehurst but Moore County residents, is aesthetics and safety. We can argue about which one's first, then efficiency. Because we all see, whether we're Pinehurst native or Pinehurstans, or whether we are, live in Southern Pines or Aberdeen, Carthage, we value, if it's not the circle, we value our, I'm going to use the term way of life, but we're going to value our community at a different angle than they're going to, naturally. Okay, this isn't beating these guys up, because they're going to approach it from a standards and process standpoint. And I think that as we continue to review the circle from those two different areas, fundamentally, it's going to be very, very difficult, because we're showing them the data. We've also reviewed, John's also reviewed all of the comments. It's undeniable, and I think they want to be resistant. But at the end of the day, we can't argue that a circle is safer than a traffic intersection. And so I, and I think there's many others like me, that do not want to sacrifice safety for efficiency. So that's most of my assumptions, but I think it's really how we're approaching this. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the DOT process and standards and what's best for their traditional way of approaching this versus what's important to us in Moore County, which is, ambiance.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think that's well said. Both the CFI was an engineering-based solution arrived at by engineers who are very smart people and have lots of numbers that they use to get there. And the objection was almost exclusively aesthetics. There were a few people, because we have a few engineers who are residents here, who dug into that, and they had issues with some of the way that was. That is not an argument that we are ever going to win. I met someone in the course who suggested that we hire our own engineer. There is no way that I want to have us as our engineer trying to persuade their engineer that our engineer is smarter. That's not going to work, right? But there were some inconsistencies, as I pointed out, this table, which I did not bring a copy of, but this is from this 431-page technical analysis, or traffic analysis technical memo. This was how they actually approached analyzing traffic in the traffic circle in the future. They took in this the historical AADT data, that's their actual traffic count, average annual daily trips. The right-hand side was the then 2013 or 14 vintage Moore County. Shannon, go back to the other one, please, first. So on the right-hand side is the Moore County Regional Model. That's the old version of the traffic demand model, which has now been updated. And you can see the growth rates for each road coming into the circle that they assume. But the very far right-hand column was what their consultant ultimately adopted. 1.1 to 1.5% growth in traffic per road. And that was very difficult to argue with then because that was very much in line with long-term population growth in the county to the extent that there's any correlation at all. The problem is, in order to get from 50,000 to 80,000 trips a day, you have to grow at 1.75%. That's higher than all of these numbers. So their own numbers didn't get them from 50 to 80,000. You know, we will at some point, Jeremy and I will go and ask to talk with them again. I'm sorry, Shannon, if you could now put up the other table. So this is table 5 from the same document. And this is the peak hour performance afternoon of 3 or 4 of the best designs. Well, they have no build, you know, kind of do nothing. And then concept 14 and concept 17 and concept, well, 17 was the shifted pillow. And what I asked them to do, and I want to send my analysis tomorrow of the public comments back to them. And I actually, in the meeting that Jeremy and I had, I asked if they could produce this data for the current plan, because it was not one of the ones that was studied for this. And I have no idea what that's going to show. Even, you know, they admit, because if you look at just the first column, average vehicular delay, shifted pillow, 52 seconds. Easily the best there, but that's off the table. And so what I'd like to know is, of the current plan, which was not studied as part of this, what are their projections for that and how do they stack up against these others? I will tell you that, speaking just as an individual, a version of the concept 14 is, I think, something that is the best, will produce the best solution of the other ones that they studied. It may or may not be as good as the one they have on the table now. And I'll be happy to tell people why, but that's something that's a little bit down the road. We're not at that point just yet.
And John, if you will, the chart before this,
Yep.
it'd be useful if they have the data, because that chart cuts off at 2023. If they have 24 data and 25 data, which they might not have, but at least 24 data, it'd give us a little more thorough look. I will say this. Their proposal, they've come a long way since the shifted pillow. And there are some things, and I've said this before, I think their proposal about the circle at Airport Road, the reconfiguration on Beaver Lane, right turn in and right turn out only, are both sensible and changes to help move traffic. I still maintain that the incremental changes are the best things that can be done from our standpoint. Certainly, we've seen that happen with the lane dividers and the better signage. But I put down one of their other projects that's supposed to happen simultaneously with the circle is the widening of 15501 going north, which is the only 2-lane road coming into the traffic circle. All the other roads are 4-lane. So that is a born to be backup of a road. And I don't know why they can't begin those, I'm going to say now, I don't mean tomorrow, because what is being proposed is not to be let until May of 2031. That's what it says.
Well, they're going to start right-of-way acquisition
That's
August
right,
of
but
next
no, but
year.
they're not going to
Stick a shovel in the ground.
until May of 2031. On the theory of course, it's post the U.S. Open. I don't believe if they're widening 15501 going north, it impacts the Open at all. But I'm not going to. Those are my thoughts. But go ahead.
Sorry,
Doug?
on that specific project, I don't think that can necessarily be moved up because they haven't designed it yet. I guess maybe Barb and Kevin haven't had a chance to talk, but are we coming out publicly and saying that we're opposed to the current design? Because I don't think we have officially done that yet
No,
as a council.
In generality talked about it. I think what I would propose is that over the next week or so, I will socialize a resolution that I think will be reflective of our current thinking as a council, very much similar in tone and approach as to the resolution that was unanimously adopted in opposition to the shifted pillow over a year and a half ago. Because we need to keep working with them. There are incremental changes that can make a difference there. The residents that I talk to on this or contact me they just don't want to see a big visual destruction or of the circle. They understand that improvements should be made, and there may be some things that need to be cut and pasted, sliced, whatever. I understand that. I don't think the proposal with traffic lights has become an issue with folks because of one, safety, and two, aesthetics. Right now, they don't see a traffic light until they get to, at the circle. And I think when you get to there, that's a little bit of a change. But maybe we can do something with a few traffic lights. I just don't know. I just think the current proposal is just too dramatic a change to.
And even beyond that, I mean, I've focused my comments tonight on a lot of data that has come up that's new, right, which would be supportive of reevaluation. And maybe they come up with the same answer anyway. But I think they have to re-examine this idea of 80,000 trips, because I don't think that holds water. But what came out in the conversation that Jeremy and I had with them is they're still not sure how much right-of-way they need for the current plan. And we had someone come to a meeting 2 or 3 meetings ago from Pinehurst Trace saying that they've been told that there could be an impact there. Jeremy actually came up with something that they hadn't even thought about from Taylorhurst. It may only be one house, I don't know, but if there's more than one house
That's right.
that backs up to Midland Road, and they're not on the water system, they're on well and septic, and their septic fields are out there. And so as you begin to think about, because there will be some widening of the road out to Airport Road, that would be an impact there that they had not considered. So they still have some things that are in flux. This is not, they say it's the final design. They said the same thing about the CFI. Saying it's the final design doesn't mean that they've pinned down all of the details. They don't really know how much road they, sound or noise was not one of the biggest items that came up here in the comments. But one of the things that we talked about is if they do a sound study and if it suggests that they need noise mitigation, it is likely to mean, or could conceivably mean, I don't want to say likely, these 12, 15-foot high walls. And they would also want to locate any public utilities that currently run alongside the 211, let's say, as it exists. They would want those on the private property side of those walls if they had to be built. And there'd be an additional 10-foot right-of-way there. So you're not just talking about whatever right-of-way they need to add 2 lanes of travel. Then you got to build a wall, and you got another 10 feet on top of that. So they're not certain exactly what that means yet. And they'll get there, because they're not going to do right-of-way acquisition for another 17, 18 months.
Jeremy?
I want to make a comment on what you said, and then make something that make a point that we should all be aware of. So, over the year, and I told this to them, so over the time frame that we've been debating this circle, I think that both sides have been ingrained to whenever the other provides some data that's factual and provides a point, that side disputes that data and looks for holes in it. And I think at the end of the day, if we're trying to create, something that's aesthetically pleasing, that's safe, then everybody involved needs to focus on what's important, which is that. And I challenged them to do that day. Something that we should also be aware of is that the standard for DOT projects is 1% for landscaping and for aesthetics. They did mention 1% of the overall project cost.
I did not.
That's a
realize that was
standard.
the number.
That's a standard. This is what we should be aware of. They have been discussing the possibility of what was it, 1.5 up to 1.5%
He even told me at one time he could go up to 2, so.
Up to 2.
I haven't
So
seen they
where I
said
wanna-
2,
is-
yeah.
is we need to focus on that number for ourselves also, because if the standard is 1, I mean, we see standard projects around the state.
I'm making
We
a
need
note
to
of it.
be-
I
So I want to make sure we were aware of that, so I'm.
okay, no, thank you.
compromise.
I had not thought about that. Barbara, do you have something you want to say?
Well, I can't see where we go from here. It seem, we have to, first of all, I agree with the idea of the resolution. I think we need to make our points known to them. It's very distressing that they appear to be not willing to reconsider. Now, John, with your new numbers, maybe that will change. I hope that will be the case.
If I were in their chair, I wouldn't be signaling that willingness either. I would just be saying, this is the design. We got smart people who came up with this, and this is what we're going to do.
But you know, last time, they also had smart people that came up with the shifted pillow, and you could have made the case. You know, this is from as copy off Jeremy. From an efficiency standpoint, it may have been the right fit, but if you were factoring in safety and aesthetics, it was a loser or very unpopular. But
Just one question for clarification. John, I know we're not interested in the 80,000 trips. What is the number that you think is appropriate to plan for?
I haven't tried to calculate that, Barb. I would guess that it'd be in the 65 to 70 range, right, from 50 today. Now, I've actually recently been trying to keep my own, I've deliberately gone through the traffic circle at various points in the day and kind of recorded what my wait times are. And I went through at 8 o'clock in the morning, Wednesday or through a weekday last week, and it was under 30 seconds. And then I went through at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was a little over 2 minutes. Most people, transplants who've come here from Washington, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, they're all going to say, well, what difference does 2 minutes make? But that's today. And I have no problem saying that if 70,000 would still be up 40%. And so up 40%, I don't think doing nothing is a solution. I really don't. I think if we had to try to go out and sell this design to the public, I think we would have some difficulties. I think there may be other designs that are not do nothing that would go in the direction of improving where things will be, not necessarily today, but in 15 or 20 years.
John, I think you should be congratulated for bringing an evidence-based approach to this. Everyone's got an opinion. Few people have data, and you have data on this, and it's compelling. And I think that people of goodwill, who all want a good outcome, will be moved by the evidence that you're bringing forward.
And the implications for the county of this population reduction, it hits water, it hits schools, it goes way beyond just the traffic circle. And that's more or less the thrust of the article that I've written. But it particularly, because we are dealing with data-driven people, they're engineers, that's how they live. I'm hoping that we can get them to consider this in lieu of something that they've already studied and they have data for what that would do.
one of the things that I think we should factor in is that right now we are in the midst of 3 significant road traffic projects that are going around us. 211, Highway 5, and the Sand Hills Boulevard. All, I would call them major projects. And they're going to be worked on for the next 2 years. So this is the type of thing that maybe we see. What is the impact of those roads to this circle when they're completed? Because I'm convinced they will have an impact on traffic patterns. But I don't know what it's going to be. But now that I know there's going to be less population, it might even be a better impact.
Thinking about the county land use plan, if someone came to them with a proposal to begin a small town, and I'm going to say arbitrarily, somewhere along Route 73, or, which is where they thought they would be.
West End, yeah.
Right. And that could change that. When we were talking about the specific proposal for the gas station up 15501, Kevin, I believe you said, hey, for people who live in number 6, it'd be nice to have an alternative to get, to be able to get certain things there and not have to go through the traffic. So the presence of a development there will have at least a small change on traffic in the traffic circle. These things are all interconnected. You can kind of subdivide them and look at them individually, but at the end of the day, you got to put them all back together.
I'm reminded in 2000 and early 2010s when we believed that the Bragg movement of, Fort Bragg was going to explode our population here in Moore County to such a degree. And what we found was, yes, we grew heavily in population, but not at the rate that they were expecting because of all of the things that John is pointing out. Schools, infrastructure, density that we are holding inside of our municipalities. And we're not going to, unless we're going to start building, high-rise apartments, then they're not going to grow here. Right. And so they chose Harnett County, sometimes for a cost offset. Harnett County took most of that growth, and it just reminds me, everything that you bring up reminds me of all of that same concept that's happened again.
Cumberland County, interestingly, had the largest absolute number of people population decline of all 100 counties. Now, percentage-wise, it was only 6%, I think, but it was 25 or 30,000 people projected less in Cumberland County in 2050 than they were projecting 2 years ago.
And Cumberland County had, of all 100 counties?
Again, total number
Total
of people declining, not percentage-wise.
I got you.
Just circling back earlier to something that Jeremy said, DOT, they're reasonable people, they're good to work with, but they did say that, we don't expect that any population changes are going to necessarily change what the design is going to be. So I just want to kind of throw that out there, that
That's-
I don't expect them to change their opinion based on any new population data.
I would wonder, though, if they ever thought the population change would have been that significant.
I don't think they ever use the demographer's numbers as anything that they projected on.
But I think that, isn't the demographer have a certain responsibility, or is that to the SMP?
Well, no, MPOs do have to use their data for certain things, but they don't necessarily have to do them for traffic projection. I mean, there's actually, I found a statute that
Yeah,
talks.
there is some
I mean,
statute.
the demographer's numbers are important at the state level. They deal with allocation of, like, the sales tax revenue. Sales tax are collected at the state level, but when they figure out how much to give back to Moore County and how much to give to Pinehurst, it all has to do with the demographer's numbers. Doug, I think you're absolutely right. I think when they said that, I don't think they had any idea that a change of this magnitude was possible.
I agree with that.
And we'll see. So, I think for us to make the case to them is a reasonable thing for us to do. How it will be received is another question.
Sure.
Yeah, I found what I was looking for, section 136-202 in the code about it, but it's specific to metropolitan planning organizations and the population estimates certified by the state budget officer, which is the person responsible for the demographer. Okay.
So,
I will proceed and.
I think Doug has a question that wasn't fully answered.
and we're on the same wavelength, because next steps are, you're writing a resolution?
I want
Is
to
that
draft
the
something
intent?
and circulate it for comment, and we'll hopefully have a finalized product to take up at our next meeting.
And maybe this is going a step too far, but is the points of that resolution going to be that, one, we think that based on new population numbers, you should reassess the design
That
of
will be one. That will be one point.
And two, we just don't really want the road going through the middle.
Well, I don't know, I don't know if I want to be that specific, but I really, I think we are actually become a little more data driven than I think we were 2 years ago as a group. Because 2 years ago, it was more we were really talking about aesthetics.
Don't cut down the trees.
Don't cut down the trees, and so on and so forth. Maybe we've just matured in this process, but everybody else likes to be very data driven, and all of a sudden, we're looking at the same data they're supposed to be looking at, and it's a little different than what we were told it might be.
Well, and Doug, the corollary question to yours is, at what point in time do the three of us want to go back up to Carthage and have another chat?
Yeah, absolutely, and we should keep talking with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that talking with them is what got them this way, okay, rather than hanging their hat in the shifted pillow, which I thought,
The two meetings, Pat, that you and I and Doug did, and the one that the three of us have done, I think that the tone is good. There's reason to believe that accommodation may be possible. I don't think it's going to be easy, but
all right. Well, we'll proceed. Go
One
ahead.
last question. One of the things that we talked about was our concerns around the safety issues with all these traffic lights going. Where are they around those safety issues? Have they addressed those?
I can tell you one discussion that I had with Ruben is the idea, there's lots of published literature, including from the NCDOT, but also the Federal Highway Commission, what have you, that intersections are inherently more dangerous than circles. Because somewhere you got somebody turning left across incoming traffic, right? And if person's not paying attention or they run the light or whatever, that sort of accident is much more severe than what we see currently in, and by the way, our accident, I'll send this out to you all. I got data from our police department, and the trend of accidents seems to be down. It predates the bollards. I think the bollards are helping. But those accidents, still 90% of them are
Fender
property
benders.
damage only.
One of the most interesting statistics about the traffic circles, in its 70-year history, there's never been a fatality. That's on their own chart that they presented to us 3 years ago. I saw it the other night again. Fatalities, 0. They have all the crashes, they have all these things, but fatalities is a big goose egg.
Current design, Barb, somewhat flies in the face of much published literature.
You're right about that. Okay. All righty. We'll move from there. And let's go on to item B, which is a discussion on the implementation of the Senior Advisory Committee. Doug and as well as certainly Kevin, who was in the forefront here, have been noodling on some of the things that we talked about at our previous two meetings. And I think we're pretty close here, where we would be able to also take up at our next meeting a formal announcement regarding this and an adoption of a senior advisory committee. You look at these work products, you'll see there's a thought given to a rollout plan, policy document, and lots of data. I think it's very more focused than it was when we first started talking about it, and I think it's something that works with our demographics, the history of our village, and as we found in getting more information, there are other communities that have organizations or units similar to what's being discussed here. So, Kevin, I'll ask you or Doug if you want to start it off to sort of run through this material, and then we should feel to make comments if we think there's something we can improve, or
I'll make one quick comment, and then Kevin, you can have the rest of the floor for the rest of the evening. So at our last meeting, John, you mentioned something about clarifying what staff's role was in the support to the SAC, and so I changed that here. I think I met the intent of what you had said.
You did, with the exception of the third point, and I discussed this separately with Kevin. I'm not saying it has to be read this way. It can be read that it's staff's responsibility to identify who these people are. And my comment to Kevin is I think that the people who will serve on the SAC are better positioned to do that. And if they're going to initiate a discussion with them, they're going to start that discussion with some knowledge, because at least several of the people that we've seen have subject matter expertise there. So I thought that that could possibly be changed as well. I think the things that you took out were correct.
Sure, I mean,
Can you take us to the line you're talking about, John?
the
Third bullet there.
Oh, the third one that is the third one now. Okay.
yeah, and also a grammatical error I'm noticing
But
now, but.
To me, this read like a staff responsibility, again, for which I'm not sure staff has the requisite expertise.
Okay.
Or not as much expertise as the members of the SAC itself would have, so they might be better positioned to actually do that.
I don't think it matters one way or the other. I think we could just eliminate the third bullet and nothing changes.
Other than that, I think this was a substantially improved draft. I think we're very close here.
Okay. Kevin, walk us through this, because we need to be educated about this. This is the first advisory committee this village is undertaking to establish in over a decade. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, fellow councilmen, for helping to refine this concept over time. And, as the mayor pointed out, the village has not launched a new advisory committee in more than a decade, and that alone speaks to the seriousness with which we approach citizen advisory bodies. With that in mind, we've been very deliberate in our formulation of the Senior Advisory Committee, doing the homework, clarifying its purpose, soliciting input from council and staff, and thinking very carefully through the details to bring this forward. At its core, this is a committee about listening. Pinehurst has a large and remarkable population of older adults. Many have held positions of significant responsibility in their professional lives, and this committee gives us a practical way to tap into that experience for the benefit of our residents at every age. The structure we're proposing is clear and disciplined. It's not about adding bureaucracy or duplicating effort. It's about focused input, thoughtful problem solving, and helping us think about what lies ahead, about accessibility, mobility, safety, novel forms of residential care, and how people continue to live full, independent lives here as they age. I think this reflects Pinehurst at its best: thoughtful, intentional, and forward-looking. A community designed to age well is a community designed to work well for everyone. And I'd be happy to take any questions about the various documents we've prepared moving toward a hopeful launch.
I think we probably ought to look at the, now that Doug has really, you covered the policy document, and we think we've got what we need there, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about the rollout of this. And if you probably have already started working with Kristen, but I think we need a really good launch. One of the reasons I wanted to see us be methodical in how we got to this is because, first impressions matter. And so if we can get to that document and talk about some of the things that we anticipate, and maybe others have other ideas or suggestions of other things we should consider or not. Let's get to that.
Have the rollout document? It's one of the 4 on there. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, this really takes us to, hopefully, a resolution on February 24th, our next meeting, to announce the formation of this committee. But prior to that, we've done a lot of work to put the groundwork into place to create content and to give careful consideration to the elements that will follow on from the launch. So looking at a 1 to 2 month window out from preparation and rollout, from the point of adoption, core materials finalized, slide decks, posters, digital materials, candidate recruitment begins, call for candidates on the VOP website, post-introductory SHC content on the VOP website explaining what the committee is intended to accomplish, press releases, an op-ed in the Pilot and Sand Hill Sentinel, presentation to the NAC and local social service organizations, foam board recruitment posters where appropriate, and candidates then will begin to submit applications via the VOP website. I think if we're good at this, if we do it properly, the success metrics will be a strong applicant pool, a broad representation across the community, and positive community response.
Let me ask Doug a question. Doug, as you look at this, do you think it's realistic for us to be ready for a first official meeting in May or April, whichever? Because if we model this after the NAC, we're not going to have July and August meetings, and so we'd like to get at least 2 in before. But I don't want to rush something. If you say, hey, we should wait to May, or
It all depends on how quickly people apply and how we go through that process. So say this is approved end of February, we give 30 days for them to submit applications. We need a little time for us to review them and have council approve them.
Okay.
I do think April is probably a little
Aggressive.
quick.
okay, so
Aggressive.
May will be your target then. We'll,
You have a May and a June meeting.
yeah, you have
and
2
then-
meetings, maybe done. But that way, it's we'll figure out what is the right repeating day of the month at the in the next week or 2. Okay. May first meeting. Okay.
If we scroll down, we do anticipate here a May 11th inaugural meeting, followed by one in June, and then we go on the summer hiatus. It'd be great to get a couple under our belt and get the group working together prior to the summertime. Do you want further discussion on these?
Well, I'm curious if others have comments or thoughts or suggestions, or is there something we haven't thought about, or is there a question about, what about this? What about that? I'm just looking at May.
Very thorough to me.
Yeah, I think those are great speakers and items to discuss at the first couple of meetings.
I mean, it is my impression if the 2 or 3 people who came, probably December, maybe it was even November, to speak on this topic, if they are at all representative of the people who sign up to be on the committee, if they're at all representative of that, we will have a very strong committee, and I believe they're not the only 3 people with subject matter expertise. And they will be as important in driving this and changing it if it needs to be changed as anything we can come up with, certainly anything that I can come up with. I think it's a great outline. I think it should be viewed as wet cement, not dry cement, and let the committee, let's get the people on board and let them see what they think. That might be the topic of the first meeting, actually.
You know, John, it's a great point. I mean, we have an incredible talent pool here in our population, and people with broad experience and domain expertise in these areas. As you point out, we're going to have no shortage of applicants. We're going to have no shortage of quality applicants. A lot of what I've written here is just to begin to sketch out what's within the realm of the possible. It's going to be the committee that has to own this. They have to drive this,
And I think they will.
and I think they will. I think they'll insist on it.
I think, again, taking just the 3 people at face value, they want to. This is not just someone has to beat them over the head. They're going to take this and run with it. Maybe in directions we don't anticipate, but they'll be good directions. They'll be informed directions.
Agreed.
Pose a question to, I guess Doug's the best one here. When you look at our advisory committees, there's the sort of the big 2, the ones planning, zoning, and historic, and then you get to the others: beautification, bicycle pedestrian, NAC. How do you think this senior advisory committee would differ, or would be really somewhat of a copycat, but with a different focus of these other ones? You got any thoughts about how that might work?
Yeah, I think it certainly most closely parallels the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Obviously, that's more geographically based, and this would be not have that same restriction. But I think it's a group of people that have a like goal, and they meet together to provide feedback and give direction. And then actually, in that way, it might more align with BPAC, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
But they have no statutory responsibilities, so they can take this in whatever direction they think
Yeah.
is helpful to the community at large, which is useful, I think.
Right, it might be more like bicycle pedestrian. Or even, and I can even see the similarity also with the beautification, because, and Barb, you know better than any of us here, they really sort of own that committee, that group, right, don't they? Yeah. I mean, they are fully engaged and involved, and if we can get the senior advisory committee to be similarly, hug the issues, that would be very helpful for its place in the community. Okay. Other thoughts? We need to turn this into a formal resolution for the next meeting. Will we need to, it should be an ordinance, or is it just going to be a resolution? What are you thinking?
So there'll be a resolution to adopt the policy.
Okay.
Generically on this topic of committees and commissions, one of the things that we've discussed a little bit informally is perhaps asking advice of council on ways to strengthen HPC and planning and zoning.
We have, and I've talked to Jeremy also about that, and we just need to kick around some ideas and talk with staff and the lawyers and see,
I just
what
wanted,
are our limits?
Yeah, and not that I'm opposed to that, but they're much more strictly regulated by statute.
of course, but I remember the discussion and wanted to resurface it as something, and maybe the answer is can't do anything. I don't know.
It's something we can tackle, but after we get these out of the way. But Jeremy, you have something you wanted to add? It looked like.
No, just more to come. I mean, I think that's where we're at. We're kind of in a research stage on a lot of things, and Doug, I think over the next week, we'll knock on your door for that. Okay. If that's, all right, not to leave anybody in the dark, feel free to ask. It's not
Okay.
secret,
Let me
but
thank
we're researching
council.
some stuff, and it's off topic, so.
Let me thank council for your thoughtfulness and your input on this. We've gotten to a better place, and I think the work product shows.
And there's no question that you've been a driving force behind this, but you've been very thorough on how you've pieced this together, and I think that will enhance the likelihood of it being a well-performing organization. So you're gonna need to keep your hands in this pie, Kevin, and look forward to that. Okay. Other comments?
Not on this topic, no.
You have, okay, well, we'll go to other topics. Doug, do you have any other comments about this? You know what we need to do next then? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, we'll move from this topic. You have another comment?
A year ago, I think I stood in for you to welcome the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, to our
Yes.
meeting here in Pinehurst. I got an email asking me if I would do the same thing this
Yes.
coming Monday. Is that because you're not around? Are you
Yes.
fobbing this off on me?
Let me
or-
tell you, yes, I forget what it was, because I like groups like that. I'm
8
trying-
or 8:30 on Monday morning.
What
What-
time? Oh,
Was it GFOA again?
GFOA.
oh, I
yeah.
know why. I have a doctor's appointment, and I just couldn't get out of that.
Then I will respond to them and be happy to.
Which reminds me, is it, hold on, is it Thursday, Doug? There's the town of Davidson,
Oh, yeah.
where, that is at the,
The Carolina.
it's at the Carolina? Okay, I was planning to go to that early in the morning, and, I don't know, stay for an hour.
Yeah, let me,
You want to check on this whole deal?
feel like it was like 11 a.m. Well, I'll send an email out tomorrow with dates, times, and.
Okay,
when-
yeah, the only thing it says here is 8 to 11.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be that long.
No, I didn't know that. I just, okay. And, well, that's, hold on. There was something,
I mean, this is still an open meeting from their standpoint. I mean, presumably people could
So
drive over from
All
Davidson.
five of you can go if you really want
Well,
to.
no, but I mean, if I lived in Davidson, I could drive over here and attend this meeting. So
And I think I've mentioned this, but I've been invited to address the North Carolina Mayors Association winter meeting. They're here in Pinehurst on Wednesday through, I guess, the end of Thursday, and so I will address them. But that's about it. I'm just getting these things confused. All right. Okay, other business? Here- Go ahead.
Like to propose that we post our new decision criteria policy, development and growth
sure.
policy on our website.
Okay.
That-
Let's make,
It does say on our website that we do post policies, and
Yeah,
that's a new one.
let's find a right time to put it up.
Yeah, I mean, we have a document center, which, that's where it should belong. Oh, it's there already?
Okay,
Okay.
Doug, let me
So
make one
there it is.
suggestion. Use it, put it in, on a filler on the homepage for,
Yeah,
a
we
few days.
can put some, shine a light on it.
yes,
That's all, yeah.
that's good. We'll shine a light on it, that's the right word. Okay, good suggestion. All right, is there anyone who wants to make a motion?
I move to adjourn the work session.
Sorry, 10 a.m. Thursday.
Thank you. Now I know. Okay, we have a motion
Second?
and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.